So we got Logan Boesch here, and we are gonna do episode, I believe this is 6 or 7, in the GKM Masterminds. Appreciate you taking the time out. I know you're a busy man there, Logan. I want to just kind of ask you a few questions. We can kind of go back and forth, and we can get a good idea of who you are, what you've done, and what you're currently doing. So you want to tell us a little bit about your past experience before you got into solar, and then a little bit about your journey in the solar industry?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Glenn. It's always good to be able to kind of hang out and got something I'm passionate about with a good friend. So a little bit about me. Grew up in a small town, southern Minnesota.
Unknown column.
Very with very few solar panels, or really the main thing was, we were a farming community, and sustainability, growing our own food, things like that were a big piece of what that was, which made it really nice to kind of have this background of farming and, kind of how important the planet is. And so, thought maybe I was going to end up doing that with my life. Things took a little bit of a different turn. I kind of wanted to get out of there and kind of go out and do my own thing. And I was kind of doing some soul searching to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I like real estate. So I got into real estate for a while, did that. Actually, made some decent money at that, but it just wasn't, the passion wasn't there with that. So what I ended up doing was, again, did some more soul searching, and I actually bought my first solar panel. I was 16. I just found it the other day. I was home at my parents' house, and it was like in the back of my closet from like when I was a kid. Like it's like, I think it's like an 8-watt solar panel. Like had 2 like little clamps on it you could like hook onto a battery to charge, and it was like for like an RV or whatever. But I remember like using that to charge like a garden, like lawn tractors and stuff on the farm. Just little stuff. I wasn't really doing much, obviously, with like the 8 watts or whatever it was, but it was just cool to be like, oh, it's like free energy from the sun, right? So kind of was like, well, that was all something I thought was cool. So just did a little more research on that. And at the time, Solar City was huge. I mean, most people watching this probably knows who Solar City is. Technically, they're Tesla now. And it was like, well, I think I want to live at the beach, and I want to work in solar. So where's the best place to do that? San Diego, California, ground zero, pretty much back in, 2015. So decided to move out there and started working for Solar City. And really that was the start of it. I was the Home Depot guy walking around getting people to sign up for appointments. So I learned a ton about lead gen and talking to people, and then moved up to a sales rep, went to 3 or 4 different companies, became a regional manager, and then eventually where I am now, about 6-7 years later, I'm living down here in Florida, running my own company, and it's been really good. It's been quite the journey, and there's days when you're like, the hell am I doing? And there's days like, this is the best thing ever. So like a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster for sure when it comes to all of the things that we've been through. And I mean, you've been in the industry almost as long as I have. You said 15?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And have you done it very much moving around? Like, was it San Diego to Florida, or did you sell in other states?
Yeah, so San Diego, and then my company moved me to Michigan to open up an office there, because I was running the San Diego office at that time, and they had just a really great opportunity. I don't know, maybe 2018 was it probably, when Michigan came out with they had some really good incentives, and DTE is the main power company there. They they had just raised their rates, and solar was really just starting to make sense. And then we could also service Chicago and kind of the Eastern Illinois area from that, which they still have those SRECs going on right now, which is a good market for solar. If people want to be in the blistering cold, which I don't, so that was actually why I ended up leaving. I was like, I left Minnesota to get the hell out of there. Like, I'm not doing that. But so that's really what happened is my company had moved me to Chicago, then to open up another office. So we had the Detroit, Chicago, Indiana office. We kind of had a triangle going there. And I just started, getting that office open, and winter was coming, and I'm like, I'm not doing this again. Like I'm heading to Florida. So had an opportunity to come down to Panama City Beach, which is where I actually went on spring break back in 2011. And so I knew the market a little bit as far as real estate and solar goes, and said, you know what, let's go dive in head first to that and get in this Florida market. So.
Heck yeah. So how has it been so far for you out there in Panama?
It's been good. I mean, when the pandemic hit, people just flooded this market like crazy. I'm sure everyone's seen the stories, whether you're from Florida or not, we were open, everyone else wasn't. I was very fortunate. It really was at that time just luck that I had decided like, hey, I'm moving to Florida, because I moved here right before the pandemic, and we shut down for 30 days essentially, and after that it was like do whatever you want. So we were able to sell. We were doing, I remember there's a couple times we had like this one weird lady that like showed up with a broom, and she's like poking one of my sales guys away at the door, like, get out of here, like COVID 6 feet or whatever. Other than that, people are like really cool about it, and not too worried. So
Okay, awesome. So you've been in the industry for a while now. You're in Florida now. What's some of your experiences in the Florida market? Do you feel like it's a hot market to sell in? Is there some issues with like utility companies? Like I know there's a bunch of different types of like what would they call it? Different utility companies that are out there.
yeah, it's a great question, Glenn. So essentially there's publicly owned and traded utilities, which most people know who those are. FPL, Florida Power and Light, Gulf Power, which actually just got taken over by FPL, so it's going to be the same thing. TECO, Tampa Electric, and Duke Energy would be the main ones in the state that are good to sell in because they actually have net metering. And then you have all these little
municipalities is what I was trying to think of.
Yeah, so you got the municipalities, and then you have the co-ops, which essentially their net metering program is shit. I mean, it's just not good. In my opinion, I think it's actually doing a disservice to the homeowner to tell them they're going to save money with a co-op. So I steer all my clients away from that, unless if they're like, hey, I want the battery. I don't care about the savings. Like I want to have the battery backup and the power, and or I care about the environment, or they got to have something else besides the savings. Or I'll just tell them, hey, like don't talk to me about it. Don't let some other solar guy tell you that it's going to work, because I mean it's just not. We've done enough of them now, and we know the customers, they understand. They're like, well, I'm still getting an $80, $90 bill, and I'm still paying my solar bill, so which, like I said, we told them going into it was going to happen, but
right.
It's definitely not a saving money thing if you're on.
Even if you do tell them, they usually come back and they're not happy with it the next year, which obviously doesn't help with brand recognition, like getting more referrals and stuff like that. So you might as well just sell in the areas that they're actually going to save, and you can show them that savings. So you're saying, like, as far as net metering with storing the power with the grid, that it's not good in every utility company in Florida. It's just those top utility companies
just that have good. And then there's huge competition in those now. I mean, if you're in the Tampa, Orlando markets, especially, I would say those are kind of ground zero for Florida solar. I mean, there's probably 300 companies selling all in all. I mean, there's a ton, which to me, I came from San Diego. Out here, even 2-3 years ago now it's been. When I first got here, that I think the number of companies have probably doubled, if not tripled, from when I first got here. Because now you get like these internet companies that are selling, and they just have someone, installing it for them. And it really is going to come down to a lot of quality control, who's actually doing the install for you, what that looks like. There's so many little nuances that, some people miss when, a guy in Salt Lake City picks up the phone and closes a guy in Orlando, and then someone shows up from Daytona Beach to install it, and they can't get a hold of them. Like, we've had to service a lot of systems for people that have had subs do their work and then they're gone, and you're like, oh, sorry, I got to pay my guys to go out there. But
right. No, that definitely makes sense. I feel like that's going to be, we're seeing that in a lot of these other markets that have been, around for longer periods of time. And the only way that we can kind of look at what's going to happen here is look at those places to figure out, what went wrong, how can we make it better in our area. We can't control these other companies that are doing disservices to people, telling them numbers that aren't true, building systems that are underproducing what they say that they'll produce, and not having any guarantees because they're planning on just being out of the business in a couple of years anyways.
Grab a quick buck and run, right? So that's something we're seeing in the industry, is a little bit of that, I guess, call it like turnover happening. I saw it in San Diego before I left. I remember walking into one, this is one of the last appointments I ran in that town. I walked into an appointment and they had they're rich people, obviously. They had this big, long kitchen table, and they had 8 bids, all in paper, laid out. And they had one, like the 4th slot was open with a bid. And they're like, right there, just go ahead and set it right there. We'll give you a call in a week, let you know who. So they took 9 bids down. And I mean, you can't set, like, there's no value proposition there, right? It's a commodity. And Florida's starting to get commoditized too. It's a race to the bottom. Who can do it the cheapest? And so there's really 2 things you can separate yourself when it comes to that, is branding. Obviously, it's like, hey, when something happens in 6 months, a year, 5 years, we're going to be here to actually take care of you. And you're not going to have to pay $800 to have a service call and a micro swap and whatever that is. And the other piece of that is actual like salesmanship and being able to articulate to that homeowner, what you can bring to the table. And then obviously the pricing is still important. You can't be 15 grand higher than the next guy and still probably win the deal. I don't think your brand, your brand's probably not going to push that. But if you're 3 grand higher and you have a value prop, I think you win that deal in this market.
Yeah, absolutely. So what now that you're getting into a little bit of knowledge here, what do you think helps you stand apart when you're in the house compared to like another company? I know you've been in the industry a long time. You sold with Tesla in the past. How do you bring that knowledge into selling for more EPC installers? Because most of the people that we work with on the mastermind are a part of some sort of smaller EPC. Some of them are with the bigger guys, but a majority are with the smaller EPCs. So what would you say that you brought from, say, Tesla to what your current business?
Well, I would say what I learned there, just in general, of like selling solar, if that makes sense, like beat up the bill. I don't know if there's anyone that doesn't run a solar appointment today that doesn't beat up the bill and make the power company the bad guy. I mean, that's so important. If you're not doing that, I mean, it takes 10 minutes. I think that's something that's very huge, right? It's not a question of which solar company to go with. It's a question of, we got to get you away from those guys. If you can start there and then move them down that line of like, well, now we know you're going solar. Now, how do I make sure that it's with me? But you got to start with that top one of like, they got to feel the pain of the utility before they're ever even going to make any sort of transition away from them, because they've been trained for the last 200 years to pay their bill, rent their power, every month, write a check. Oh, it's $400 this month. What do I do? Well, I'm not going to turn my lights off. I'm not going to quit charging my cell phone. Here you go, Gulf Power. Here you go, Duke, whoever it is. So you got to get them off that mindset, kind of retrain them there. And then that next step would be, for me, I truly believe it's like, I just care about my customers so much. I sit there, I listen. Most of my appointments are 2 hours. And it's because we're talking about, going golfing. We're talking about, I probably went golfing with 6 of my customers. I've actually went skeet shooting with one of them. Like, you're actually making like a friend out of them. Like, they're human, you treat them like a human, not like they're just a commodity. Like, oh, yep. And I want to make a quick couple grand off you, and then I'm out of here. It's like, I give them my own cell phone. Like when something happens, they can call me, and I'm gonna call and make sure, like, hey, make sure you're taking care of Glenn. Like, he's my guy. Like, we got to get a guy out there tomorrow and swap that micro or whatever it is, right? So
I feel that for sure. So, do you feel like making friends with your clients, is that something that you want to do before they sign or after they're installed, or where do you draw that line, like for people that are newer to the industry?
I think it's a flow, and being newer just to sales in general. I don't know if it's the industry, because that's more of like a sales thing, I would say, than more of an industry specific thing. But sometimes, you might have to go visit someone twice or three times to actually get that deal inked. But then, we're a big industry of, sign on the first time, sign or die, or, everyone's got their own way of saying it, which I'm a pretty big proponent of that when you're newer, because you might not have some of those tactics and things to be able to beat, the second guy or third guy coming in. And if you're selling on commodity, that's what's going to happen. But if you're selling yourself, your company, your brand, and also pricing and the value there, I think you can get that phone to ring for that second appointment. Or, obviously, I always tell my people, you gotta set a solid be back if you're going to do it. So, okay, it's the 13th today, Mr. Jones. I was out here at noon. You said you need what, a couple days? So how about Friday at 2:00 if I come back out here, and we'll go over everything and get everything moving forward. You said you need a night to sleep on, to think about it, whatever it was, right? Whatever that objection was that you couldn't overcome in that first meeting. And, that can go a long way, as long as, you plant it correctly. So.
Right. Yeah. It's situations that kind of look in my face where they didn't sign yet. So I went and had a beer with them or hung out with them, and then they become too friendly. We're too much of a friend for them to like make that decision almost. And I don't know if you've ever had experience like that, but I wanted to kind of put that out there and see if there's a time, like after they're installed, that's when you go be more friendly with them. Or...
Yeah. So you saying you've had issues where before you met with them, they were kind of cool, you went and had a beer, and then they were like too much of a friend where they wouldn't make the decision. Like they didn't go solar at all.
Right.
It wasn't about who it was with. It was like they just didn't want to do it at all.
Right. Yeah. And it was just, it's happened a couple different times where I was like, is this a bad practice? Or maybe I should wait until after they've made that decision to get like a referral partner friendship with them, after they're installed, because then it's locked in. Or, maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't know.
I've had that happen a couple times, actually. Really, really great dude. Honestly, still, I would say a great friend. He's from San Diego, so I don't talk to him a ton. But, we ended up going on like a fishing trip together after, really it was after he decided not to do it. But, everyone's got their little nuances and things. The reason was, I believe, is it was a partial shading issue and a partial or maybe moving issue. So the
Right.
system wasn't amazing for them, and I knew that, where, it wasn't going to be a home run. And like anyone that's listening from the California, especially San Diego market, I mean, solar out there is just such a home run. Their power rates are so high that, it's not like in Florida where, you get some with a little bit of shading on an east-west and you're like, well, you might save $5. It's like you could still save $80 in San Diego or something like that.
Right.
And we ended up being probably, like you said, almost analysis paralysis, and then we're friends. I've had that happen too. So I don't know quite what the right answer is there, but I would say
choose it wisely, figure it out yourself kind of deal.
Yeah, and if they're your friend in that first appointment, like if you can win them over and they're like, I trust you, the like, believe, buy principle. I'm sure people have heard of that before. And if you can get them there, and then they're going to want to sign up with you there if you did everything else along the value prop chain correctly, of like, oh, this is a home run. I'm going to save $80 a month. My power bill is going to be minuscule. You know, I own it, I get a tax credit. You know, if you do all those things, you build the value in that, then like, yeah, why wouldn't I just get it from my friend, this guy I trust?
Right. Yeah. It's not, I think it was more circumstantial, like in this situation where it's like, yeah, I may move in a few years. And because I am so honest with that stuff, it's like, yeah, I don't know if it's a super smart investment for you to purchase it. You know, if you're going to move in a few years, especially in Florida market where they potentially may not get out what they paid for it, even though I may be able to give them a really good deal, like a cash price. There's still that unknown there. So, but yeah, moving forward here, what do you feel like is something that helps you with pull through rates? Like, what's your cancellation rates usually like, and what do you think helps you have a cancellation rate that's lower than some?
Honestly, I'm going to go right back to the well with what I said. So when I first started selling in the home and the industry out in San Diego, I would have a lot of cancels. And it was, my appointments were usually an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, there was one, I'd signed up 22 people in a row. That was like the record at my company. Like it was like blew everyone else out of the water. And I remember like one of them, obviously they were going to cancel. Like I was, it was at like number like 16. I was like begging them like, hey, please, can you just sign this? Like you can cancel it tomorrow, I promise. But like I got this straight, like I actually put it back on me of like, I wanted to win that bad, right? So, but what I really noticed between those actual pull through rates and the cancel was like the trust. Like they believe you, and you know you spend more time in the home. I would spend that 2 hours. I would spend that 2.5 hours. I would ask them again before I leave, like, hey, is there anything else you can guys think of? Like I will bring up objections that they didn't bring up to me that 90% of the time they get brought up. What happens if my roof leaks? Everyone's going to wonder that eventually, and you don't want that little seed to sit there and fester in their mind. And then on Tuesday morning, they call you and say, oh, or worse yet, they email you. Actually, this is a funny story. I got my first telegram about a week ago. So apparently telegrams are still a thing because, you know, like in the cancellation policy, because it was wrote so long ago, like it says like you can like send a fax or a telegram or what, I don't remember exactly how it reads, but like that's one of the lines. This lady actually sent in a cancellation on a telegram. It was the wildest thing. But apparently telegrams are still a thing. So, but yeah, the biggest thing I would say is just making them your friend, making sure they understand, and making sure that you're stomping any of those objections that they could sit in their mind and fester. And instead of them calling you and letting you walk them through it, they just call and cancel, right? So that would be the biggest thing.
So when you go in for presentation, you were saying that you bring up a lot of the objections that they have. Do you have like a list of things that you go over to make sure you're covering all of these type of objections, or is it just kind of like shooting from the hip?
I would say now it's more shooting from the hip and what I feel, just because I've ran so many solar appointments. I mean, I've had to have been thousands at this point. I wouldn't even know what the exact number is. But for my guys though, because now I'm doing more like training and, you know, building sales teams and stuff like that, I give them what I call it an objection manual. And essentially, you know, here are the top 15 to 20 objections you're going to get. We all know them. What if my roof leaks? What about the warranty? What if I move, right? We all know like the 10 to 20 objections that are legitimate objections or questions really is what they are. And, you know, I give them those main ones and, you know, hey, here's how you overcome it. Here's a canned 3-sentence response to overcome it. And then, you know, you can put your own spin on it. And I just kind of go through that. But I would say main ones, obviously warranty, make sure you bring that up. The company of like, hey, this is us and what we do. The roof leaking and I mean, those are really like the main ones that if they don't bring up one of those 3 or 4, like I'm going to bring it up.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And one of the things I remember when I was trained with Vivint is they had like 6 things that they listed out. And in when I first started in Massachusetts, it was like What happens if I move? What happens if my panels get snow on them because it was
Yeah.
Massachusetts? What happens if my roof leaks? What happens when the power goes out? That's a good one to usually
Yeah.
cover, because
Yeah.
most people are thinking that they have solar power when power goes out.
True. Yeah.
Things like that, where you're bringing up those objections and saying like, this is what happens, so that way it's not in the back of their mind when they do close. Because if it just comes down to pricing, and then they go talk to their friends or family, they're not prepared. They're not prepared to answer those things, and then they're just going to call you, and that's where cancellation skyrockets. And you see
Right.
that a lot of reps when they're not covering basic things that they didn't even realize they didn't cover.
That's actually a really good one, Glenn. This is something that you just kind of ticked on something there that hit me. I wonder if this would work. I don't think I've ever tried it in the home, but like you're talking with someone and you ask them, all right, so who's the first person that you're going to go and tell that you just got a solar system? Because that's going to be a two-parter, right? One, is this the first person that's going to call him an idiot and make him call me and cancel tomorrow? Or two, is this the next person that I'm going to get a referral from? So I think that could be a two-part win. I've never done that. I don't know if you had any experience with that.
Yeah, a little bit, because when I first started, I was getting quite a bit of cancellations when I started in Massachusetts. And I was wondering why. So I went to some of the top dogs and asked that same question, and they said, well, you need to make sure that when they go talk to their friends, that they know more than their friend does, and they feel confident in sharing that information with them. Because if they don't, then their friends selling them on why not to do it, instead of them selling them on they need to do it.
Sure. And their friend can win out at that point, especially if that person is, more of a like malleable mind or whatever, where they're just, oh well, Jim said, so I'll just, I'll call this Glenn guy and tell him to kick rocks.
I don't want it anymore, because my buddy that's never had solar, knows nobody that has it, knew a guy that his cousin got screwed with solar.
Out in California, like it's like always like 8 states away. Like what happened there? Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, there's no perfect way. I don't feel like, there's a lot of people out there that tote that they have really great pull through rates, and I've picked their brains on the same sort of things, but nobody's been perfect. They may create that relationship a little bit better. They may stay in contact with them a little bit better. They may send them info and just be hands-on maybe a little bit better. But really it comes down to chance, right? I mean, you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know what their past experiences have been. And maybe one or two things could have threw up a red flag that you would never know unless you were sitting there with the rep in the house. You may pick up on it, but that's about it.
And I think part of that might be where you are at in your solar career as a salesperson too. Like when you're starting out, I would argue if you're not getting cancels, you're probably not pushing enough. And I know push is like a scary word or whatever, but like, applying gentle pressure is what I like to say. Because there's some people that literally just will not make a decision unless if you kind of help them into it a little bit. And so sometimes you might push a little more on someone than you should, where maybe they weren't ready to make that decision, but you still got them to sign up or whatever it was. And at the same time, after you've been doing it for a while and you're working on a lot more referrals and you're maybe running a lot more solid appointments, I would say that's another thing too, is you're going to set more solid appointments the longer you're in the industry, because you're like, well, why am I going to waste my time to drive out to these 6 people that kind of maybe, dark houses and things like that. At the beginning, when you're first starting out, you got to take every single thing you can get because you're learning. But at the, later on, you're like, well, this guy doesn't really seem like he's into it, and it's not something that he's really going to do. So, maybe you don't run that appointment, or, at least you don't, push him into signing up for something he's going to cancel. So.
Right. And then another thing too, that when you were talking about that, I was thinking as well, is it depends on how you were introduced to that person too, right? Is it a referral? Was it a cold door knock? Was it somebody that saw an install down the street, and they already have some trust for you? Because that can make a big difference too. Because I've seen where people that are really good at referrals, their cancellation rates are really low because 80% of their deals are coming from referrals. So referrals aren't as likely to cancel because they're getting it from somebody that already has done business with you.
Right. And I'll even add just one more little piece to that. This just happened to me about, I don't know, a week or two ago, probably about 2 weeks ago now, where neighbor got it, loves it, says it's great, said, Jim across the street was asking about it, went over and talked to him, and he's got like a $400 electric bill, like insane, right? And so it's him and his wife. He's ready to do it. I sit down with both of them the next day. They're like, yeah, come back tomorrow, whatever. So I come back tomorrow, sit down. Jim's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's get it going. But, she's just a little not sure, got to ask. I know I could have got them to sign papers that day. I know it in my heart. I could have done it. But again, it was a referral. You don't want to, don't want to be too salesy. You don't want to, push too hard or whatever. And they would have ended up canceling if I would have signed them that day. But what ended up happening is they ended up calling me the next day, because I had a really good rapport and relationship with them. They called me to tell me like, hey, we talked to the kids. They were like 82. They're like, they said they don't want to fool with it when they take over the house. And, that's tough. I asked, hey, let me talk to your kids. Cause again, they weren't in the appointment with me. It's kind of bringing it full circle back to, who's the first person you're going to talk to when, I leave or whatever. But, I think if I could have got in front, I think it was the daughter, that I could have showed her the value, because they were saving like $160 a month. Like it was a really, really good deal for them. They had like a perfect south face. Like and I gave them a great deal on it because it was a referral. Like they really messed up. They're gonna have a $600 bill on fixed income in the next 5 years, and unfortunately they're just gonna be paying Gulf Power way more than they should. But
right. And that's the hard part too. Like a lot of people that I know in the industry, they don't even want to talk to the older people. Like if they knock on a door and it's an older guy, they're just like, yeah, do you know the neighborhood very well? Instead of even pitching them, because they don't even want to, take that effort to see if they can close those.
Right.
Because
they had tax appetite too. They were making, I think, right around 100 a year. They were pulling out of retirement. Plus they were still like, they're hustlers, they're still working like side jobs and stuff. He still owned a company. Like they still had tax appetite. They were like, in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll probably shut it down. And, we're going to get on our boat and just travel around, just cruise around Florida. I was like, this is literally perfect. You're never going to pay taxes for the next 2 years, because it was going to take about 2 years to harvest the whole tax credit, because it was a huge system. I was like, you're not going to pay taxes until you retire. Once you retire, you got all your credit, and now your power bill, you're on fixed income, is what was it, like $240 a month or whatever it was. And then when you guys pass, hand it to the kids, and they're loving life. Like it really was a good deal, and I just couldn't get them.
And the kids killed it because they didn't understand it. They heard something bad about solar or something.
It was the kids lived in the Carolinas, and one of their friends did it up there or something, had a bad experience, and solar's stupid is essentially what I got from it. And I said, hey, like I said, I had a really good rapport with them. I was like, hey, can I just have a 5-minute phone call? Just let me talk to them, and just so I can understand. And when no, they know all about it. They looked into it.
They're the experts. You're not the expert.
Yeah,
exactly. This is my kid.
yeah.
That happened a lot of times, so I feel you for sure. So so what do you feel like is like a main thing that the new reps that you're bringing on in training, do you feel like gets them started and keeps them motivated to go out there? Are you having them create dream boards, or what are some things that is helping you?
I do this goals template, I guess is what I call it, which it sounds like maybe a dream board similar. It's a Google sheet where it has a list over here. And like I have a few standard things in there: your living expenses, your house payment. So like by living expenses, I mean like your rent, utility, whatever. Like have those things listed out. Okay, so it costs you $4,000 a month to live, and then all right, what else do you want? Okay, like the one guy that I got working for me, he's got a kid that's I think 8, And, he wants to start saving for college. Okay, well, where do you want to send him? Well, it's probably going to be about 30 grand a year to send him to Duke or whatever it was, right? Like, okay, perfect. So we got Anthony's college here times a year. All right, so you need 160 grand by the next 10 years. And so we'd figure that out. Oh, you want a couple four-wheelers so that way you can go riding on the prairie with him, over the next, and you want that this year. Okay, so we put that in. So we would list that all out. Okay, so you need to make $8 grand a month in order to hit all these goals. You want to buy a new house. We had a bunch of stuff there, right? So if you do $8 grand a month, that's what we need to average, and you can have all this. Basically, it sounds like what your dream is, right? So, and then because I'm pretty mathematical, like mind when it comes to that stuff. So that works for me, right? Like, okay, $8 grand a month, that's what we got to do.
And then are you breaking it down for him as far as like how much he needs to put in per week in order to hit those goals too?
So then we got the column there. Okay, you need $8 grand a month. All right, how do we get there? So like for anyone that's been with me 6 months or more, I would say, whenever they're starting to kind of roll and you can actually pull their own data and numbers and look at it, you'd be like, okay, so Glenn here, you're averaging, your close rate is 60%, and your pull through rate, you lose another 10%, so you're doing right at 50%. All right, so right now you're making 200 calls, you're knocking 200 doors, you're running 4 appointments, and you're closing 3, and one's falling off for credit or whatever it is. So you're actually getting 2 sticks. All right, your average deal size, you're doing about 30,000 on your deal size, whatever that is. So your average commission check right now is $4 grand, whatever that number is. All right, so 4 grand, so we need to do 2.5 a month, whatever it is, and we'll back into that and then see how those numbers skew. Like, oh, wait, you need to do another 100 calls and another 50 knocks every single week. So I break that weekly, every week, and then that number is going to jump up there, and all of a sudden you got one more close. Now we got you where you need to be.
Okay, perfect. So that's something that you'd recommend for people to do so that they have a clear goal that they need to hit, whether they're getting into the industry right now or if they've been in the industry for a while and they need to reset their goals.
Yes.
This could be a good thing. Because, I've been in the industry for, 7-8 years now. And if I don't reset my goals, then it doesn't help me. Like I notice that I'm just stagnant because I don't have anything to hit, nothing to aim for.
Yeah, done it too. Because and we'll get, where sometimes we're an enemy of our own mind, right? Oh, I'm so great. I don't even need to do that. I can close my eyes closed. If I walk into a house, but the fact of the matter is, the more that you're doing like management and things like that, you get a little rusty. Like you're not as good in the home. Even that appointment here a week or two ago that I was talking about, could have I maybe done that just a little bit differently? Because I wasn't 100% on. I was probably like 85%. I know, and I'm leaving that house, I even realized I was like, oh, I did that. There's little things that when you're not in the home every day and you're not on the doors every day, you're not as sharp. So, you got to reset those and make sure that you're putting in the time for yourself to keep yourself moving forward too.
Yeah, absolutely. I experienced the exact same thing too when I got more into like managing people rather than doing it myself. Then I go back to closing. I'm like, I miss all these little tiny steps that really was what got me those closes. And now my closing ratio drops. And I'm wondering, well, I'm the best. I told myself I'm the best. So why ain't I getting the same amount of closes? Like I used to be able to do this. What happened? And that consistent effort that you put in and looking back on, all the different presentations you've done, hopefully you're able to record them and have somebody that has experience to really point out like, hey, I can't see what I'm doing wrong. What do you think I should add to this, or what should I take out of this to make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be so huge, especially now that I'm getting more into consulting and like coaching mentorship, mm-hmm. and finding those little things out and finding people's blind spots. That's such a big thing. I also, I'll get you some information on this contact that I have, but there's this company out there that does a way that you can like record every like presentation, whether it's door knock or like in the house. And then the reps can send you the presentation with a time stamp of like what, like, hey, you know, I think I could have answered this objection better, right? They had an objection at this time. And then you can put comments in there about like, this is what I would do in this situation. And that's been a huge help for these people
really
that, you know, need some sort of way of keeping track of these things. Cause you're never going to know. You have 10 reps that are going out and selling, and you can't help them all at the same time. But if you have a tool like this, it may help you keep things a little bit more organized and add more value to your team.
That's a nail on the head there, Glenn. That's very well said. The first time that I recorded one of my presentations and went back and listened to it with someone that knew way more about sales than I did, it literally changed my life. Like, that was the difference between me making 40 grand a year and me making 250 a year. I mean, it was absolutely mind blowing, the difference. Cause like, you can come back and, you know, jam it up with someone, be like, oh yeah, just couldn't get over this one objection. And it's like, well, wait, how did you say that? And when you're, you know, will make it up in our mind because we think we're better than we are. And two, you forget, like, you leave the house and there's so many things you're not going to remember exactly how you said it and the tone of voice you used and what was the body language of that person. Like, you could literally, like, the one I listened to, I'll never forget it. Like, the guy that I was listening to it with, he was like, did the guy sit back in his chair and cross his arms right here at this point? And I'm like, holy shit, yeah, he did. Like, it's a recording. Like, how the hell did you know that? He's like, oh yeah, dude, he was done. You lost him, and everything from this point forward, he wasn't even listening. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you got to circle back up there, make sure he understands, get him re-engaged. Like, the sale was dead. It was like 10 minutes into it. Like, it wasn't even. So it's that's a really good one.
Heck yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, and those little things like what you're talking about, as far as people crossing their arms and not being engaged, one of the things that may help too for those people that are listening is hand them something, right? Because now they can't cross their arms anymore. Like,
Right.
You have to hand them something, show them something, especially like being on the doors for a long time and figuring these little things out. There's so many little tiny, you know, what do they call it? Like little nuances of people where they're just like body language, their tone of voice, you know, eye contact, if they're looking down when they're talking to you, you know, these little things that we can definitely, you know, help everybody that's in this. That's why we're doing this mastermind, is just to feed that information to people, because we've made those mistakes and we'll probably still keep making those mistakes. But, you know, high tide rises all ships, and this collaboration is huge. So I appreciate you sharing. And we know that, you know, the more that we share, the more abundantly that we give, the more it comes back to us. It just happens automatically in the world. Like, it's just, it's a nice thing to have in our corner. So one of the things I wanted to go over with you, so we talked a little bit about the knowledge that you want to share, motivation. Let's talk a little bit about gratitude, as I know that will help you and I as far as, you know, what are you grateful for that you've been through, you know, maybe some failures, and, you know, just gratitude of your daily life right now, if you want to share that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we probably most connected on was, you know, that's a interesting word for, you know, alpha male type people to even use words like gratitude and empathy and things like that. But you know, I think especially in sales, you can get in your own mind and burn yourself out very easily, right? And what are ways that we can prevent that? And it's like, I mean, there's mornings I remember you're laying in bed and you're like, I just don't want to get out of bed and go to work today. And you can do that if you're a sales guy. You can kind of make your own schedule and what. And it's like, so what's something that you can do to overcome that and be like, do I really have the audacity to lay here in bed and waste this life that I'm so grateful to have, that I can go out and pretty much make unlimited money and, you know, set myself up to be able to do things like there's there's an organization that I'm trying to like help build up with doing like solar for like people in Africa and stuff like that, which is like one other thing. We can talk about that another time. But it's like you're so grateful to have the opportunity to be able to do that, and that you're not the one in that situation, that you have the ability to help someone like that. I think that's so important. And when you really lean into the gratitude of even, hey, I'm on this earth, I have a roof over my head. One of our door knockers that we hired, that was probably 3 months ago. He's actually not with us right now. You know, you can only help someone so much. He was literally living in his car because he couldn't afford rent. Like he had credit card bills and all this stuff, like everything. And we got him out on the doors and we went through him and trained some stuff. He closed, I don't even remember how many it was, but it was a bunch of deals. Like he went out like one, even it was even like one Saturday, and he set like 8 appointments. We closed like 3 of them, like just crushed it, right? He made like $4,000 in like one day, you know, and was like able to rent an apartment and do all that. And I think it's just amazing that we even have that opportunity in this industry, and then just in general being in America, you know, where we have all these freedoms. And you know, even with like COVID, if that didn't wake you up and be like, wow, how great, how lucky are we? Like we can go outside. Like there was a time, like you said, you're from the Northeast, I'm from Minnesota. I mean, they're still like shutting stuff down up there. It's wild, you know? So it's like, there's always something you can lean into. What I did years ago, I don't do it anymore. I probably still should, but I'd write 5 things every night before I went to bed that I'm grateful for. And that really helped change my mindset as far as like, why not always be grateful? And, you know, everyone has their bad days, but at the end of the day, when you can really lean into that, it makes your higher highs and higher lows. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do like abundance as well. Like there's so much abundance out there, and focusing on the glass being half full rather than half empty, because we can always point out the negative in anything that we're doing, especially when we have a job like knocking doors, where we're going door to door and we're getting constantly, you know, rejection after rejection. You can focus on that negative and then bring that to the next door. And one of the things that helped me when I was getting into the industry and was kind of in a low point where I was still selling, but I wasn't happy to go out and do it. You know, I was just in like a kind of a funk. And my mentor, his name's Lance Rich. He was selling for Vivint Solar at the time, and he brought up the abundance mindset, and I'd kind of heard about it in the past, but never really focused on it. But he did a training on the water molecules and how they freeze, and they were able to talk negatively to some of these water molecules, and they weren't very pretty. Like the crystals were all jagged and funny looking, and then they were also able to talk abundantly to these ice molecules, I guess, and they were literally able to change the molecule into something that was beautiful. It was like a snowflake rather than being all jaggedy. And that's when I started to realize more and more about how important abundance was. And he had me start doing abundance meditation, which I didn't really believe in meditation. You know, I'm a Christian. I grew up in a Christian church, and we were always kind of shunned away from that. Like meditating is more like Buddhist stuff and stuff like that. But it's power over your mind, right? And you can do it for good or bad. And there's this one abundance meditation by Bob Proctor, and it's 20 minutes long. It's on YouTube. You can get it on it. And I recommend anybody that has any sort of struggles right now, that they're not looking at their life with gratitude, if you can listen to that once a morning or even at night. Morning is best because it's starting your day right. Maybe even before you do anything, get up in the morning, wake up, turn it on, just lay there and listen to it. And that literally changed my life over just like immediately, pretty much. I was able to start going out and crushing records and being happy about what I was doing. And people could tell when I was coming up to their door that I had something good to share, which made my conversion rates go up. And it just helped all around. So
what's the name of the guy?
His name's Bob Proctor. And if you just Google abundance meditation, it'll be like the third or fourth one down. It's 20 minutes long. And he recommends listening to it for 30 days straight. And it's the same thing, right? It's 20 minutes long, but they're going through the same thing. But if you really focus on that, and it really changes people's lives. I've put quite a few people onto it. And as long as they're sticking with it, if I fall off, I'll go back to it, and it still helps me.
That's good.
So it doesn't matter what stage in your career you are. I mean, we all struggle with the same things. It's not like what we're talking about is new. We learned it from somebody else, right? And being able to share this with the mastermind, hopefully it brings some value to these guys. So
I love it.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know, we've been talking for quite a few months now since I got into Florida, and we started doing the texting campaigns together about 3 or 4 months ago. You want to tell everybody a little bit about your experience from start to finish, and if it was profitable or if it's something that you'd recommend?
Yeah, actually, we had, I was a little bit skeptical at first. We talked about, we were trying to figure out how we were going to structure it and whatnot to start with. But I mean, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on lead sources over even just the last 2 years since I've been doing my own thing. And it's the old adage, you got to spend money to make money. So I'll try anything once, and you look at my LinkedIn and my Facebook and my whatever, I got 5 new messages every day from these lead companies trying to sell you something. So, it's hard to weed through it and whatever, but obviously, we just had a good connection of like the gratitude, things like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not give it a shot? And first one was pretty good. Second one, I think was our best one, if I remember right. And I think we did 3 rounds of it. And then, it started out really good, and we were getting good business from it, and then we were getting referrals from the ones that we were getting in the text, which was good too. And it was good, targeted where we wanted to be. And
how would you explain it being different from like other type of leads, like compared to like a Facebook lead?
It was so they set it up for you, right? So essentially they have, I'm guessing, a VA somewhere in the Philippines or something that they give these canned texts to, where they're texting thousands of people, and then once they get, it's usually what's supposed to be a power bill where they actually give them usage. Then they say, okay, thanks. I'll have my energy consultant reach out to you. They shoot it over to you, and then you take it from there. And then we respond, oh wow, $320, that's a huge bill. When's a good time to give you a call or come by and go over the program with you. We set the appointment, go out there and close them up. And when we can get the appointment set, they've pretty much all been solid. Honestly, I would say, there's quite a few credit fails, which with anything, when you can't, Facebook changed their algorithms, so it's harder to sort by credit and income anyways with that. But, you're going to get those. And I call it, those are still kind of wins, right? Where, you're going to get credit fails and, people that are genuinely interested, at least once you get those appointments. But it's more targeted. I would say it's like hunting with a rifle instead of a shotgun, which is nice too. So when you do have that appointment, like it's a pretty good appointment if you do get it set.
Right. Good to know. I appreciate you sharing. We're trying to do something a little bit of a combination with the texting campaign so that people can be a part of the mastermind and have access to the campaigns as like a partnership, just like you and I are set up as. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing on that. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about on your closing, I guess, statements?
Well, there was one thing that when we were talking, it just never fit into what we're bringing up, but it just made me think of it. And it plays into abundance a little bit, and it plays in just like, it's like when you're hot, you're hot. Like when you are in a zone and you're grooving in this industry, whether that's on the doors, getting that, knocking one more, or whether that's just running more appointments and pushing through, like, don't take a day off when you're hot and just like make hay when the sun shines. That's really the best thing, because when you hit, like, as you go through, like, eventually with all sales you end up hitting some sort of like wall that you got to step over. But when you're cruising, like, just beat it into the ground, ride into the sunset. So that way, when those lows come, you built up that buffer for it, I would say. But yeah, that's about all I have. I really appreciate you having me on, Glenn. If anyone wants to talk or whatever, keep my handle right there for pretty much anything: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. That's what I use for everything. So you can reach out to me on there if you want to connect and talk about more stuff or have questions. So
Yeah, man, I appreciate it for being one of the guys. That's one of our top episodes that we've done so far, and appreciate all the knowledge that you shared in this mastermind. And hopefully, we'll get you back on here soon, and we'll get you into some of the collaborations that we're going to have moving forward.
Sounds great, Glenn. I appreciate it.
Okay, man. All right, we'll talk to you soon. See you.
Yeah, have a good rest of your day. We'll see you.
You too, bud.